Morning, so I'm here.
Morning. So all are here. Great. Mr. Saraogi.
Yeah.
So
Good afternoon, everyone.
the panel. Morning. I request all panel members to keep their videos on, and others may switch off videos, so that will make it easier for us to actually conduct the discussion. Thank you. So let me kick this off. Morning to all the four of you, and thanks very much for joining. I have to thank all of you for really accepting this invitation and joining us today. This panel discussion on changing consumer preferences in food and feed industries, impact on seed development. First, let me introduce you all to the audience. Can you all hear me properly? Is it okay?
We can hear you.
Okay. Let me introduce all of you to the audience. We have Mr. Pradeep Poddar. He is the former MD and CEO of Heinz India and South Asia. And later, he worked as the Global President, Water and Functional Beverages, Tata Global Beverages. Welcome, Pradeep, to our discussion, and thank you for joining. Apart from other things, Pradeep is also my senior at IIM Ahmedabad, and so we do have some special relationships. Thanks, Pradeep, for joining. We have Mr. Shiva Kumar, who is a group head, Agri and IT Business, ITC. Welcome, Mr. Shiva Kumar. Thanks for joining. He's a well-known name in the Agri circles. I think many of our members would have seen him and heard him. So he is no stranger to all our members. Welcome, Mr. Shiva Kumar, and thanks for joining. We have Mr. Vivek Chandra, who is the CEO, Global Branded Business of LT Foods. Of course, many of us must be meeting. Actually, we haven't, as an association, really interacted much with the food industry, and today's panel discussion is also one way of kicking off that relationship. And I'll talk also a little more about that. So, Mr. Vivek Chandra, thank you for joining, and we look forward to hearing your views today. Feed business is a very closely linked to seed business. So, feed and seed are very closely related because we do produce a lot of crops which are meant for animal feeds. And so we wanted to also hear the point of view from the feed business. So we are very lucky to have Mr. Amit Saraogi, Chair and MD of Anmol Foods. Welcome, Mr. Saraogi, and we look forward to hearing your views today. So this is a very nice mix. We have one agriculture supply chain expert along with the digital expertise. Then we have two from the food industry and one from the feed industry. FSII, as you know, is an association of research-based seed companies. And we invest as an industry, we invest more than 500 crores every year in research. And our research mainly consists of developing new crops, new crop varieties, which meet the customer requirements. This market-driven agriculture, which we want to promote in the country or in the world, has to be driven by market-driven breeding. Otherwise, we will not get varieties which meet the needs of the market. So this is also our research scientists develop these seed varieties, which help the farmers to grow crops that suit their requirements, consumers' requirement, because farmer is also not the consumer; he is not the ultimate consumer. So we need to understand what's happening in the ultimate market at the consumer end, so that we can tailor our research programs. You know that seed research can produce new products. It takes 6-7 years to produce a new product. So it's a very time-taking and long gestation and high investment area. And we many times waste some money in investing in projects which may not be required with the market. So it is very necessary to bridge this gap. That is the purpose of this discussion, and even for feed purposes. So we want to capture those trends through this panel discussion because we are all the experts in this field. So structurally, for today's discussion, the proposal is that we will have first 40 minutes devoted to hearing you out, each one of you, for about 10 minutes each. about your opening remarks and your thoughts and your ideas on the subject, and whatever are the key messages you want to give to our members through this. So after that, we'll spend about 10 minutes in discussion among the panel members, which will be followed by around 15 minutes of Q&A. And then last 5 minutes, I'll try to summarize what we have discussed. So that's the structure we are looking at. I hope you are all comfortable with that. So let's kick this off. So maybe I'll start with Pradeep. If you can give your thoughts in about a 10-minute capsule. Thank you.
Who should be first, Kaundinya?
Pradeep, you are the first.
I'll be the first. Okay. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I do not know whether there are any ladies here. Hopefully there are. But
there are.
Yeah. Good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a good forum to discuss, which I've been discussing over the last at least 30 years. But first, let's start with the perspective of India. We got independence about 70 years back. And there has been a major transformation in this country from scarcity to surplus. If people of my age would remember, in the 60s, we used to go to the ration shops and we had PL 480, the wheat coming in from the US, to where we are today. We are the world's second largest food producer in the world. And that had been revolutionized by the white revolution by Dr. Kurian and the green revolution by Dr. Swaminathan. So we have moved from scarcity to surplus, and there are learnings behind it. The second is India is nature's gift. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, we have arable land everywhere. And our arable land is 2.5 times that of all the countries put together east of India. And this allows us to have multiple crops. We have Kharif, we have Rabi, and we have in-between crops as well. And hence the small farmer still is plowing the land. The third fact is 70% of our population, nearly 800 million people, come out of agri-based rural India. And hence it is very critical to our existence as a country. India is an economic oasis. We have all the materials, all the raw materials, all the minerals. We have the technology, everything to convert it into valuable products. And we have the consumption basket as well in this country. So we are an economic oasis. We don't depend on any other country, excepting to some extent on oil, the fuel. And hence the purchasing power parity is a reality in India. It is not 75 rupees to a dollar. It is only 15 rupees to a dollar when you look at the purchasing power parity. And our GDP on purchasing power parity moves up to nearly $15 trillion. And that makes China the biggest economy in this world at about $30 trillion. The US is about $21 trillion. But finally, India has remained a commodity economy. But in 70 years, to make it into a branded economy, it will take some more time. But we should fast traverse this land to become a branded economy. These were some of the perspectives which are relevant when I talk about in the next 5 minutes or 7 minutes. How do we look at businesses? India looks at businesses from the manufacturing end of the tunnel, not from the consumer end of the tunnel. And that is a major mind shift of all the entrepreneurs and managers in this country that has to happen. Looking at it, businesses from the consumer end of the tunnel will make it much more effective and much more pliable. Let's take the example of Apple. Apple has become $1 trillion company within space of 25 years. And that gives us a reminder. Apple always has focused on the consumer. And there is a single brand called Apple which has been built. We do not have brands, excepting maybe Amul, Britannia, Dabur, ITC. Though we do see some smaller sprinkling of small and mid-sized brands today, but they will need a lot of support to make this economy into a branded economy. So we should align ourselves with consumer expectations, however latent those expectations may be, because we should remember 70% of the human mind is not known to the human being at all. And that is where all the major decisions are taken. And the pandemic has opened our eyes to that. The solution to the virus has come about within less than a year. It has never happened before. It has taken 4 to 5 years to 7 years to come up with a solution to any of the viruses that we have faced in the past. And this opens our eyes to the fact that we can hasten the pace to build up a strong relationship with the marketplace. And this is possible by leveraging science. In the last decade, science has evolved very, very fast. I was working closely in the US for the Tatas, and they're looking at reversing the life cycle of human beings. We don't even think of it in this country, but they're thinking of reversing the life cycle. People should be living for 500 years. They're trying to talk about it. And that is where science is progressing. So we can leverage science to better align with consumer expectations. We cannot build a brand without a superlative product, and both should be evolving with time. What are the challenges we have faced? We are faced with a mindset challenge, basically. The lowest acceptable quality still goes on, chalta hai attitude, to the best possible quality. The world has shifted to the best possible quality. Otherwise, we would not have a Louis Vuitton or a Ralph Lauder to run the economies in the West. This shift in mindset should be happening at a much faster rate than what it is happening today. The consistent quality. We compromise on quality. The quality should be consistent. And that is where Apple have subcontracted their produce to the Chinese makers who make it on a consistent basis, the quality that is demanded by Apple. So China is able to do that. Why not India? Don't say that we are democratic and they are autocratic. That is no answer. We have got minds which are 50,000 years with civilization, and that should allow us to create a consistent quality and a produce which makes the best in the world. Our cost should be at least 5 times lower than US cost, at least, if not international costs. This is leveraging the purchasing power parity. And purchasing power parity has nothing to do with lower labor cost. It has to do with the reality in the country itself. Then our dependence on monsoon and crop failure. On Monsanto board, we had challenges in terms of balancing out the monsoon. And I think we have got a huge network of rivers that can be leveraged to go in for irrigation. I saw in Baramati when Sharad Pawar was the agriculture minister in this country, Baramati was transformed through irrigation, but he didn't extend it to entire Maharashtra. He should have extended it across the country to make it much more viable and much more effective. And crop insurance has remained only in the books. It has not even transcended to go into the farmers' lives. Crop insurance is extremely important, and that needs government support to begin with, and then we can make it into a reality. We have not used Korean's language of cooperatives. And this is a win-win situation. We should have moved away from milk and made cooperatives in sugar industry, in other industries as well, stemming from the agricultural reality that we enjoy. This is a win-win for both the small farmers as well as the consumers. And this will need upskilling rural India. This is a challenge which Ramdurai, I know him, has been taken up over the last about 15 years. Upskilling is extremely important. You don't need a qualification of an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, but you have got it innate in you to create automation and technology and leverage technology. Then comes to the GM. Why don't we go in for genetically modified recipes? I think we should, there's 2 thoughts to this. We don't need GM for foods because we have got huge arable land, which should be made much more effective than what we are doing today. But the GM should go in for non-food items like cotton and other things. What is my advice to seed researchers? My advice is first, don't look at the hind mirror. Look in the front mirror and plan the future. The future is never created by the past. All the parameters changes today are all different. So collapse time is the most important thing. Today, our business plans have shifted from 10 years to 5 years to 3 years. Maybe it will be 1 year later on. But collapse time, the pandemic has opened our eyes to collapsing time and creating value for the market. Focus on India-centric requirements. Don't go by what the West is doing. Learn from what the West is doing and focus on India-centric requirements. And finally, it is hasten slowly. Though we should hasten, we should do it slowly to capture what is of essence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. These were my few thoughts on today's topic.
Thank you, Pradeep. Those are all very, very thought-provoking ideas, and then I'm sure we will discuss more on some of them as we go forward in the discussion. Thanks for bringing out some of these aspects. I now request Mr. Shiva to go next and then give the supply side view and also various other things that are related to that. Mr. Shiva.
Morning again, everyone. Pradeep already painted a picture on consumer perspective. As a supplier,
Can we hear him
I
properly?
can't hear you, Shiv Kumar.
Mr. Kumar, just check. We are not able to hear. Increase the volume or.
now, can you hear me now?
No. Okay, I think by the time he fixes his microphone, let's move on, and I request Mr. Vivek Chandra to take up next.
Right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Kaundinya. I hope I've said your name correctly.
Yeah, it is. You can call me Ram for simplicity's sake.
Okay. Thank you, Ramji, and thank you, Dr. Shiven Bajaj, for this opportunity to talk with the seed research fraternity. I am from LT Foods, one of the largest basmati company with brands like Tata, Devaya, Heritage, and Royal. We are one of the largest buyers of paddy in the country. Of course, the basmati varieties. And the work that you do can have great impact and significance in the business that we do. So there was a whole set of questions that Ram had asked us, and let me start with the last question first, last of what he asked, which is, what is my advice for seed researchers? I don't have any advice, but what I'd like to share is some of the needs that if this research group can focus on, that will help the growth of the category. Of course, I am currently focusing this comment solely in the context of basmati. Now, basmati consumption at about 10 million tons occupies a small 2.5% of the global rice consumption. Even in India, it is the same number of about 2 to 2.5% of the about 100 million tons of rice that is consumed. There is therefore a very large opportunity to grow the sales and exports of basmati. Basmati provides a superior experience on the plate and is being adopted even by those ethnicities who have traditionally not been basmati eaters, particularly the population in the Western world. This adoption by the traditionally non-basmati eaters is a big growth opportunity, in addition to the growth from the traditional consuming population of South Asians and Middle Easterns. However, the barrier to more and quicker adoption of basmati are twofold. First is the price at which consumer can convert to basmati from conventional rice. As we know, local or regional rice in India can sell for less than $1 a kilo. In India, some varieties are available for 25 or 30 rupees a kilo. Full grain basmati starts only at about 80 rupees per kg. Now, development of high-yielding variety of seeds which increase output per acre can really help in bringing consumer prices to levels where more conversion can take place. If we see how the basmati market exploded worldwide, then it is with high-yielding variety of seeds helping deliver a more affordable consumer price. Originally, we had only the traditional basmati variety, which is very low yield. At that time, the total global market for basmati was small. The development of the Pusa variety, which had a higher yield than traditional, was the first intervention which increased yields per acre and delivered a better looking grain but at a lower consumer price. Consequently, the market expanded. The next high yielding variety seed was Pusa 1121. Yields went up further, and basmati consumption has been growing globally on a CAGR of 8 to 10% annual over the last decade. The volumes have more than doubled. So if it expanded earlier, it has exploded now. So development of such high yielding variety seeds which increase output per acre, which improves the experience on the plate, but without compromising the characteristics of basmati, will be a big driver for the category. And this would be an area that we would be hugely interested in. Another area of research which can greatly help reduce cost is developing seeds which can withstand high temperature ranges. PB1 today can have high level of chalkiness as the temperatures, especially at the time of crop development. They can be high, they can fluctuate quite a lot. The seeds that can be high temperature resistant can reduce chalkiness and reduce cost of final product. The second challenge to growing basmati consumption is the issue of residue compliant paddy. The big challenge in basmati is the level of pesticide usage because of disease or the fear of infection, and the farmer overcompensates this with high dosage of pesticide. This poses a huge challenge on complying with the MRL norms of the importing countries. Seeds that are more robust, more pest and disease resistant, so that lower level of pesticides are used, will go a long way in growing MRL norms compliant paddy. So these three are our wish list item for the seed research. The other set of questions that were asked was about agri and food export opportunities, some specific requirements of consumers so that market and consumer preference driven crop development and seed research can take place. So let me start with agri export. Pradeep mentioned this. India is one of the agriculture powerhouses in the world. With agriculture production of $375 billion, India is the second largest producer of agriculture output, also one of the top 10 largest exporter of agriculture produce. So we do export a lot. Last year, India's agri exports grew an impressive about 17.5% to cross $40 billion. But prior to this, for 6 to 7 years, agriculture exports were stagnant in the vicinity of about $37 or $38 billion. Last year, the fillip last year could also have been due to a surge in COVID-induced demand and the supply chain disruptions in other agri-exporting countries like Thailand and Vietnam. So on a next 3 to 5 years perspective, the value of exports may return to the previous level of about $38 billion. Now, this is not to say that there are no more opportunities for growth of agri and allied sector exports. We account for only 2 to 2.5% of the global agri export. And if we were to take the export of cereals, it may be higher. In fact, this year it looks like we would be accounting for almost half of the global rice trade. Now, this brings me to an important point. India's agri exports are still heavily dominated by commodities. And growth in these will then be a function of trading, and which is quite a lot also about price competitiveness. Now, I spoke of high yielding seeds which can increase output per acre, seeds that consume lesser inputs, lesser pesticides and fertilizers, all of which brings down the cost while delivering a more competitive price. But the bigger opportunity and harder to realize is in processed food exports. Our share in processed foods is very low. We exported only about $640 million worth of processed foods and vegetables last year. Now, last 5 years, CAGR is about 10%, but the base is low and our share is low. But this is where we have a bigger opportunity to create a sustainable, non-price impacted business. And it also allows for India to capture a bigger share of the value chain, pass it on also to the farmer so that farm incomes grow. Now, I said it is harder to realize because we need investments in capabilities. We need investment in infrastructure, processing units, farm gate warehousing and processing units. The market dynamics of processed foods versus commodity trading are different, and we need to invest in marketing, market understanding, and brand building capabilities. But once we build these businesses are more resilient. One of the asks was, what value chain do we need to, what changes do we need to do? Now, food processing is interesting because it links the consumer to the farmer. So it really is across all the elements in the value chain, from grower to processor to exporter, and then in the market to the distributors, retailers, and eventually the consumers. And that's how we think of the value chain: grower, processor, exporter, etc. But in reality, this chain should work in reverse. It is consumer preferences which should drive farm production. So we need to build the capabilities to get those preferences. But the key is that this starts backwards from the consumers. We cannot give the consumer what we have. Our agri export today is all about exporting the surplus after our domestic consumption. But we cannot give them what we have. We have to give what they want. So what do the consumers today want from food? The world changed dramatically with COVID. We've heard this. So while there has been an unmistakable trend towards a need for variety on the table, a need for convenience, be it in cooking or in eating, a move towards premium foods, but also one of the biggest changes has been in what people are eating and what they expect in the food that they eat. We see a trend on foods that build immunity and health, which is foods that do good. These are sought. Consumers are also looking for absence of things we call bads, like chemicals in the food they eat. So safe food is a big trend. Consumers are aware of the issues of harmful residues and are concerned about the source of their food. Traceability is a big movement. When you don't have this default option for consumers anywhere in the world, be it India or US or wherever, is that they buy the big well-known brands. India cannot progress much in global processed foods without building trusted brands. But coming back, all this need for food safety, traceability, eating foods that do good, etc., is in addition to the fact that globally consumers are getting more concerned on issues like sustainability, environment, health of the planet, fair trade, etc. So this is the new world where our agri and processed food products have to compete. It is the world of health conscious, food safety seeking, environmentally responsibly grown crop seeking consumers. So what is the implication in seed research? I will leave you with a few questions here. Today we, LT Foods, we are selling fortified rice where we add a nutrient-rich kernel in rice. This whole fortification Poshan Abhiyan is a very big movement with the government also. But can we develop seeds such that paddy that is grown is naturally rich in nutrients while meeting the regulatory environment in the country? The second thought I want to leave you with is that the globe is very concerned now with water and soil preservation. Lower chemicals, which is developing more disease-resistant seed, helps the soil quality. We at LT Foods have introduced SRP, Sustainable Rice Platform, that, for example, has cut water usage by about 40%. Can we further develop seeds that can grow with even lesser water? Combining these with the sustainable agriculture practices can further help us claim that the product has been grown responsibly and sustainably. So we're claiming that. Can you help us make that claim even stronger? Another thing that can help here is that if we have seeds that need shorter cycle time from sowing to harvesting, which reduces the inputs and the cost and water usage. Thank you again for inviting me here. These were some of my thoughts. Some of these may already be part of what you're working on. Some may trigger new thoughts, but regardless, I look forward to working with you learning of the work you're doing, and partnering with you wherever it's possible. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vikram Chandra. It was really a lot of points which the seed industry really works on currently. Climate resilient crops and the natural resource conservation crops and nutrient enriched or fortified crops and things like that. Of course, rice is an example of where the water conservation becomes much more important than other crops because of the way we grow rice. So very, very good points. I'm sure some of our people will ask some more questions on that, definitely. But I think these are all very well laid out. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Shiva, are you okay now?
That you have to tell me whether you can hear me now.
Yeah, now it's perfect. Yes, now it's perfect.
Okay, great. So from good morning, let me shift to good afternoon. And we as agri-business supply agricultural raw material to food processors and processed food brand owners, food service companies, both in the domestic market as well as global markets. So in terms of perspectives that both Pradeep and Vivek shared, I would obviously echo a lot of them, that this is what our customers are looking for. So when we say we need to move towards a demand responsive production system, because now we have surpluses unlike the shortages economy that we were in. So essentially the key shift is that we now have to produce the buy as opposed to selling whatever is produced. I think that shift would naturally mean there are a few things that our customers are expecting. What does it mean for seed business? And an important area when you say we produce the buy, there is a deep engagement with the farmers, and therefore what the farmers' expectations are. That's what I would share. So let me first talk about the expectations from the processors, just to start one step removed from the final consumers. So an aspect that I want to highlight is on location. Typically the processing industry would want to keep the manufacturing operations closer to consumption to get the food as fresh as possible to the market, to minimize the outbound freight and logistics complications. And then raw material typically has to be moved from where it is produced. So one of the key expectations from processors is to how close can you produce the raw material nearer to my manufacturing facility. So which obviously requires adopting the seed and rest of the agronomy practices to what is required. The two examples of where we worked in the past is essentially trying and producing wheat a lot more in East India. As the consumption expanded, wheat otherwise is concentrated a lot more in North and Central, to move wheat production closer to East, and moving that, obviously given their own agroclimatic conditions, how do you ensure a better hectoliter weight, and how do you ensure the appropriate hardness and everything else. Similarly, let's say consumption of the products of potato are again throughout the country, but potato is produced in some limited geographies in the country, and therefore how do you produce potato a lot more in South and so on. So for starters, it appears that, okay, when you don't have proper agroclimatic conditions, you are going uphill. But I think this is where the work has been happening around the world. And we partner with many of you who are present here in making this happen. So that is one expectation. Another aspect with respect to location is the perspective on risk concentration. So when we have certain ingredients that go into food products, either as the basic raw material or as other ingredients, typically once you are in a consumer brand, you would like to make it available to the consumers around the year, every single day. And so therefore your blends can't change and your availability can't get disrupted if there is a problem with a crop because of some climatic conditions or whatever other stresses. And therefore, you need to again diversify your locations to mitigate that risk. So another example I want to talk about is, for example, sherbati wheat, which is an important ingredient into Ashirwad atta. And conventionally, it is just produced in 1 or 2 districts of Madhya Pradesh. Now, that's a high risk, like I just explained. So we wanted to move elsewhere. And in a couple of other states where we are working to use the same sherbati, the wind is pretty high, and therefore the plants were logging, and therefore you needed to dwarf the crop there. And we worked with another seed research organization to dwarf the crop and get similar kind of properties in an alternative location. So these are the kind of things which are location specific issues, which from a processor's perspective are important. The other factor from the processor is on the manufacturability, the processing yields, and like how much pulp you get out of a mango, and how much solid content you get out of a potato, and those kinds of aspects, which are again processor centric yield maximization. So obviously you need consistent size and shape and those kind of aspects which will make it happen. So obviously processors in turn are servicing the end consumers, and therefore a number of features that already have been highlighted. I'll not repeat them, whether it is the safety or health or wellness, and consequently the need for certification, traceability, and those aspects. But just to highlight a couple of other consumer traits which are not so explicitly mentioned. One is the angle of shelf stability. In many of the perishable products, consumers look for shelf stability of the product. Obviously, something perishing fast is a challenge for the consumers and all the way back to the producers. And there are interesting technologies on whether you can delay the ripening of a vegetable or a fruit on the plant itself, so that a farmer can harvest when the market is better, rather than perforce harvesting something and incur extraordinary costs on a cold chain, and then the consumer is unwilling to pay that kind of a price. So that is another perspective that as a consumer need, which translates back into a potential seed angle. The other is the penchant for the consumers for consuming things off season. You know, can I get mangoes 2 months ahead of when it is consumed is a big talking point, or 2 months after the mango season is over. And similarly for other fruits and many vegetables. So right now, a lot of it is for post-season at least is handled by the storage kind of vertical in the value chain. But it's an opportunity again as to what you can do in terms of breeding and figuring out these aspects. And I've seen much of this work also happening with some of you here and otherwise elsewhere in the world. So these are some of the consumer perspectives. Similarly, convenience in consumption, again, shape and size and some of those kind of things have been talked about. And lastly, from a farmer's perspective, obviously when you're producing the buy, enhancing farmers' profitability is key. So in addition to the perspectives on yield maximization not just per acre of land, but yield maximization per liter of water and everything else that other speakers have talked about. But let me just add one more dimension in terms of trying to maximize farmer profitability over a 365-day cycle. You know, when we are working in Eastern UP and Bihar, and our core crop of interest was wheat. But for wheat crop yields to be maximized and for wheat crop quality to be good, it needs to get planted at least 10-15 days earlier than currently it is done, because it's a paddy wheat cycle. So therefore, willy-nilly we had to work on shorter paddy crops, shorter duration paddy crops, which again we work with some of the partners who are present here. to cut the paddy crop time by 10-15 days, as also get into zero tilling and some of the other aspects to ensure that you get the best out of both paddy and wheat. And incidentally, one could then get a third crop also, summer moon just for 80 days, and then get the 3 crops in a year and maximizing farmer profitability. So therefore, crop duration, in addition to being done from the perspective of climate resilience and some of those angles, will extremely useful also from maximizing 365-day profitability for the farmer. So all of this obviously would mean stronger partnerships than that are currently existing between consumer-facing companies, the agribusiness supply chain partners, the seed companies, as well as the research organizations, and obviously some of them overlap. There are seed companies amongst you who also undertake research, and there are seed companies who forward integrate into agribusiness and further into food processing and in some cases even feed. So I think those partnerships would be an important element to make all of this happen in a somewhat more seamless fashion. And in today's world, there's possible a lot more through usage of digital technologies, both in partnerships as well as in translating many of these into practices on the farm as well. And just one last point is on open pollinated varieties. I mean, a lot of Indian seed utilization is OPV. Some of that obviously is not as much of interest to typically many of the hybrid seed companies. But I think in order to again raise farmer profitability, it is important to get the right models on seed multiplication there, and probably enabling even farmer seed self-sufficiency as an important angle in which one can work on OPV seeds. This is where I would stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are all very wonderful points. Your long experience in the field shows actually in many of these points. You have spent your lifetime in agriculture, so I'm sure all this is coming out of a huge experience. Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar, and we will come back for some discussion later. We now move to Mr. Amit Saraogi, and a very different perspective, I'm sure, will come on feed industry, and then what are the things happening in that industry, and how can we look at seed making some contributions towards that. Over to you, Mr. Saraogi.
Thank you, Mr. Ram. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank FSII, who has given me a chance to represent feed industry at this forum. Seed is the most basic need of any agriculture, whether it is farm agriculture or animal agriculture. And I have been learning always from Mr. Shiva Kumar. I've heard him a lot of times, met him, and it was a great learning from Mr. Chandra and Mr. Poddar. See, our topic is changing consumer preferences in food and feed sector, and what should be the impact on seed development. So over the past few years, a very different new category of review has increasingly come along about Generation Z. We know that now generation changes every 6 to 8 years. The generation after millennial now currently in school or university and their preference. For us business owners, it's important to realize that generational change, and that will always be a reality. Staying ahead of the curve on shifting consumer preferences is a great way to deliver value to upcoming generation and reap the rewards. This is especially true for farming, where changing consumer preferences can affect what growers produce and how they operate their farms and accept the new techniques to fill the gaps. This pandemic was an eye-opener for us. Farmers took to digital very aggressively, and a lot of digital presence is there of the farmers. We at Anmol Feeds, we have realized these changes and to shape in with the changing pattern of food consumption and have geared up and happy to serve the livestock farmers with their well-being and success. And these are our core values by which we keep redefining ourselves. We are a technology-driven, future-ready and contemporary brand that meets the needs of the livestock farmers by providing better, nutritionally rich, value for money products which increases farmers' profitability. Every one of our endeavors, solutions, and techniques are youth-centric and innovative, reflecting and staying true to our Nai Soch. We all know that there are different kind of animals, and each type of animal have their own category of feed, which contain all the essential nutrients required for the well-being. In the future, many developed countries will see a continuing trend in which livestock breeding focuses on other attributes in addition to production and productivity, such as product quality, increasing animal welfare, disease resistance, and reducing environmental impact, which is very important. The selection of animal feed in recent times linked to nutrition, feed conversion ratio, efficiency, and maximal growth. This is likely to change in favor of traits associated with birds' welfare, meat and egg quality, food safety, and capable of adapting to and being productive in a range of commercial environments. We all know the quality of the prepared feed ultimately depends on the quality of the raw materials such as the grains and oil cakes, which uh, goes inside the milling process. Commercial feed manufacturing is an industrial process and therefore should follow HACCP procedures through the analysis and control of biological, chemical, and physical hazards from raw material for production, procurement, and handling. Basic nutrients, all feeds nutritional requirement is different. Every feed animal, every animal behaves in a different way with a different raw material. Uh, um, um, a cow behaves in a different way with soya meal than a poultry bird. So it is different for each raw material. Each individual, each bird or each animal behaves in a different way. See, basic requirements of a cattle livestock feed must consist of protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. Dairy cattle need more energy in their feed than other animals. Similarly, a fish feed should be nutritionally well balanced, and among the various feeds investigated, soybean meal and DDGS appears to be a better and is heavily dependent on the particle size contained in the feed pellets. Today, technology to process this type of feed is based on fish feed extruder machines, which is highly technological machines. Poultry requires different level of feed components for each different stage of birds. A broiler needs different nutrition. A layer needs different nutrition. A breeder bird needs different nutrition and different kind of raw materials. This year our industry is facing and our farmers are facing scarcity of animal feed. In it is putting tremendous financial pressure on Indian livestock producers, including poultry, dairy, pork, and aquaculture. Indian animal feed consumption is high, fueled also by large scale production of livestock product for export. India's poultry feed industry is aggressively petitioning the Indian government, as we know that soya meal remains the most common protein source for all compound feeds for poultry, dairy, and this year uh, the prices has gone 3 times and the material is not available. So the government has allowed in the first time in the history to our industry to allow GM soya from other countries, and still we are not getting any respite in this sector. So my take is I've been asked this question, that what would be your advice to seed researchers for this decade? The main raw material for our animal feed industry is corn. And my suggestion to seed industry and seed researchers should be first to increase the productivity of the crop. Second will be to create such a sturdy variety which can there is an attack of bollworm, some pests which has come in last 2 years. Because of this there was a lot of crop damage. And then mostly we would request seed industry to research more on high protein maize. Maize is having 8 to 9% protein, but researchers have found that by doing genetics, the protein can be increased to a much higher level in maize, and that even the farmers will get a better price for that kind of maize. Second most important crop is soya meal, soya bean seeds. In our country, not much research has happened in soya seeds, and farmers are reusing their seeds. I don't think that organized seed industry is present in soya sector. Our productivity is 1 acre per acre, whereas in Western country it is more than 4 tons per acre. So there is a tremendous scope to increase the productivity of soya crop. Soya is not remunerative to the farmers also, because they get only 1 ton in 1 acre. If they get 4 ton in 1 acre, more farmers will shift to soya crop. Third thing is, industry uses groundnut de-oiled cake. But you cannot use groundnut de-oiled cake in broiler industry as well as layer industry. It has some aflatoxin problem, that if you use groundnut DOC up to more than 2%, you will get aflatoxin problem in the feed. So if you can get a better seed by which there is not much aflatoxin present in this, and there are certain inhibitors for poultry birds in this groundnut, if we can re-engineer through our genetic engineering, same soya meal is 45% protein, groundnut DOC is 45% protein, but industry is not able to use groundnut DOC because of these factors. Third, I will come to cotton seed meal. Cotton seed meal has gossypol, which is not good for the poultry farmers. So if we can do this engineering by which we can reduce gossypol at the seed stage only, or at the crop stage, then this crop can be used a lot. Now we are seeing that last 3 years, we are in this business from last 20 years, and we run 11 feed plants all over India. And last 17 years, we have only used corn for our as grains. But last 3 years, we have seen lot of disruption. We had to use lot of broken rice, lot of bajra. Even industry used wheat 2 years back. In a wheat prices were 3 to 4 rupees cheaper than the corn crop. But wheat is not, Indian wheat is not suitable for animal feed industry. So if we can develop a variety which is good for poultry birds, which is good for animal feed industry. And see, on this poultry industry and animal feed industry, the entire soya farmers and the entire maize farmers, their 70% produce is being consumed by animal feed industry. So crores and crores of farmers' livelihoods depend on this industry. So I have more points to say, but as the time is, I will like to rest here, and I will really urge the seed industry. They have done a good job in vegetables, paddy, but we need to do much more better job when it comes to soya meal, groundnut, then and then cotton seed. Then lot of rice byproduct is coming to our industry. So if we like the rice polish, which has higher percentage of oil, which can be produced especially for the animal industry. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ram.
Thank you very much. I think, again, very, very relevant points for our industry. And thank you so much. I think it's very interesting to see the crops that you are talking about, corn and soya and cotton, and specific requirements you have for bringing some modifications into each of those crops. I think those are all exceedingly good points. So we'll now have a few points for discussion. And I want to ask Pradeep that, you had a lot of experience with ketchup business, right? Tomato ketchup. And similar things like maybe breakfast cereals, tomato ketchup, and products like that. What is happening in those products in terms of the consumer requirement, or does the industry get the kind of tomatoes they need?
No,
Is there something that the industry needs to do to improve that quality?
on tomato ketchup, I would like to say that after Heinz went into hibernation, they have withdrawn, they have stopped that manufacturing in India, and they are importing that product. It's a sad day, but that's how it is, because they couldn't produce the tomatoes in India to the requirement at all. But the highest selling tomatoes in this country is the Heinz 1984 hybrid seeds. Nobody knows it, but that's what it is. In fact, I'll tell you that I produced the tomato ketchup at a price lower, cost was lowest in the world of Heinz. But still, it was not 1/5. As I said, the purchasing power parity, the price should have been 1/5. The cost should have been 1/5 of what it was. And then we could have marketed it at about 30 rupees, but we marketed it at 59 rupees for 500 grams, which made it out of the reach of the common man in this country. That is on tomato ketchup, but my experience has been on milk. Complan is my brand. For 20 years, I created that brand. And in Aligarh, we had the factory. We had 20 vans picking up in the morning and in the evening the milk from the surrounding areas, Bulandshahr district in UP, which is the heart center of milk in this country. But we had the testing laboratories to test the fat content and the non-fat content of the milk. But that has to improve in this country as well, because we are the largest milk producer in the world.
I know. I think that is always an area which is, one is that we have to improve milk, but also we have not been able to use that technology in other crops. The way of collecting milk and the way of testing the quality and improving it. That is also something which we have to. But tell me, between you and Vivek,
I can't hear you. I need difficult to hear you.
One second. Is that a problem? Is there an echo? Just a second. Let me use.
No echo. We are able to hear clearly.
We can hear you clearly, Ram.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. 100 times better.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah. Clearer, much clearer.
Yeah, but I can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ram, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Not able to hear us now.
Hello?
Yeah, Ram, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ram, we can hear.
But I can't hear. Hello?
Can you hear now?
I'm unable to hear you.
You're unable to hear.
No, you are very much audible.
Sir, we can hear you.
So we are able to hear both of you, sir.
Yeah, but Ram is unable
If
to
he
hear.
unplugs
Give me a
the
second.
headphone, then he may be. Somebody could message him that he needs to unplug the headphones.
Yeah. Yeah. बाद में बात करना.
So while Mr. Kaundinya adjusts his connection, there are some questions in the chat. So I think just to save time, we would like to keep the discussion going. I hope this is okay with the panelists. Right? So this question is for Mr. Pradeep Poddar. How is the vegetable juice market, like immuno boosters or health?
Can you be a bit louder, please?
Okay.
What is your question?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is, how is the vegetable juice market, like amino boosters or health drinks?
How is the market
What is
like?
the market? I think probably the question is that are the current varieties available for carrot, beetroot, gourds? Are these varieties suitable for health boosters market?
Not really. I don't think so.
Not really. Okay. So
they use a lot of sugar. They use a lot of balancers, stabilizers, which are not good for health. So that's why I say that they are not suitable for the current evolving consumers. We should have healthy but tasteful drinks.
Okay. And what specific characters would you look with regard to seed sector? What specific characters would you look on those varieties? Like for example, with high water content, or as you said, low sugar, or what characters would you like to look
No,
on
the
those?
natural sugars are fine, but they use a lot of sugar. They use sugar. They add sugar to the drinks to make it tastier, but that's not what is warranted by the consumer.
Right. Next question is for Mr. Vivek Chandra. From your point of view, sir, what are the critical basmati quality traits like kernel elongation, fluffiness, or cooked rice storability? What is important from your point as well as a consumer point of view?
Okay, interesting question. Basmati is first and foremost, it's about the length of the grain and the fluffiness, which is really, in Hindi and in our communication, what we say, lamba khila khila dana. That is the first thing the consumer sees. Basmati, I think, is perhaps the only food that is judged before it is eaten. So it's how it looks on the plate is critical, which is about length. And that's really what, varieties like 1121, 1509 did, compared to traditional. The second then is the thing which happens when you eat it, and there is a certain sweetness that you get with that grain. So if you were talking about the characteristics that you cannot really compromise, it'll be these three. So again, I mean, people in the business would know length is not just length. There is a length-breadth ratio, which gives it the slenderness, etc. But really, three big ones would be elongation, resulting in length on the plate, fluffiness, and then the sweetness.
Okay. Mr. Kaundinya, are you back or can you hear?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm back.
Okay, I think
Thank
just
you.
take over then. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I think, there are a few other questions, but mainly talking about, so the latest one is that why processed tomato market is not developing in India. For example, it is, for example, when I was running the seed company, we used to develop specific tomatoes for, let's say, the requirement of McDonald's, right? Because McDonald's needs a tomato which doesn't have much juice. So we used to develop juiceless tomatoes. But so things like that. But the other process, the industry, processing industry in tomato is not developing much. Any reasons you could think of?
Not really. I've thought about only the ketchup market, in the commodity market here in this country. But I think we should look at the consumer end, and every day I consume tomatoes at home. Most of us do that. So the tomato market should be growing. Processed tomato market should be growing. This is just from the field to the dining table we get. But the processed tomatoes should improve their quantum of sale in this country. Tomato juice also sells, but it is very limited. Tomato juice is an alternative drink to the ladies and also to the gents as well. It's a healthy drink. But there is an opportunity to build that market.
Okay.
That is processed tomatoes.
Yeah,
but without processing, we can get the tomatoes as is.
What about, nowadays there's a lot of talk about plant-based nutrition, right? Plant-based nutrition, which is driven by higher protein and things like that. Do you have any specific advice that what type of crops or plants are required to develop this particular market segment?
No, in fact, I wanted to ask the gentleman who spoke before, after me.
Vivek.
Vivek. Yes, Vivek, in your basmati rice, can you not reduce the glycemic index?
Well, I mean, basmati rice actually is lower glycemic index than regular rice.
I know that. Yeah.
So and then brown basmati further reduces the GI.
Okay.
So, Pradeep, what would you have in mind when you say that? I mean, it is not classified strictly as low GI.
Yeah.
It is a low GI. In fact, there is a brand which sells their basmati as diabetic rice.
Yeah, I know.
And that comes from the fact that the GI is low, naturally low in basmati.
Yeah. Okay. No, but then would you say this basmati that you produce is good for diabetics?
It has lower GI than regular. I mean, we don't market our basmati for for health. We market it for hedonism, the pleasure, the pure joy of eating great food.
Okay.
And if it does have the health benefits, better. But the reason you consume basmati is because it elevates your plate of food like nothing else. Now, Shiv Kumar may not agree. He'll say roti does that better. But we market ourselves as saying no.
No, I love my basmati.
But between all of you, between the three of you, let's say Vivek, Pradeep and Shiva Kumar, currently, do you get the right type of rice and wheat for making noodles or various other forms of rice which are used, or wheat, for example, for noodles or for gluten-free or whatever? Are you getting enough varieties of wheat and rice?
I mean, rice noodle is not big in the country. But wheat to noodles, we'll let Shiv Kumar answer that.
I think, basically issue is that while we may have today from a noodle perspective or many other products that we need, I think it's an ongoing effort because the consumer is continuously evolving. We need to work much closer as the respective verticals in the industry to do a lot of trial and error along with the evolving consumer and how to optimize all of these kind of issues. So I think wherever those partnerships exist, there is progress. But if you just have to look at an aggregate average kind of an answer, I think our readiness for processing industry relative to other countries is very, very low.
That's true.
Because a lot of characteristics, whether it is the traits in terms of what level of protein should be there, or whatever, maybe carotenoid content or any of these kind of properties, there is an opportunity to raise them and then appropriately segregate them and then bring it to the consumer in appropriate traceable form from a process point of view. But once that is done, it's an ongoing effort to improve these characteristics, whether it's a possibility of flaking or extruding or any of these. A lot of tinkering is required on an ongoing basis. Absolutely. So I think that requires a proper commercial tie-up across these different verticals, which will make us processing ready. Otherwise, it's a chicken and egg issue. While our poultry industry friend is here, it's a chicken and egg issue. So we don't know what is first, because everybody is looking at the other and we remain at the lower level equilibrium. Most of that remains commodity. So while individual pieces of what exists, what doesn't exist, probably will be outside the scope of the current discussion. But I would certainly recommend more institutional and stronger partnership engagements, key to take us industry to the next orbit.
Yeah, in fact, when the Prime Minister recently released a large number of seed varieties which bring fortified foods to the market.
Yeah.
That is a point of discussion we had with ICAR also, that they have to be brought to the market. So I think that's where we need those systems of research coming to the farmer and then to the consumer through collaborative efforts, through partnerships. I think that is what you are also talking about. That
yeah.
We need more partnerships, we need more collaborations. I think that is a way to go forward, because we can't bring market to the researchers unless market and research talk to each other. And that talking to each other and working together through a commercial channel in between is something what we have to achieve. So I would take that as kind of a broader conclusion from the discussion.
Because these are long gestation kind of
exactly.
Efforts, the commercial arrangements need to be really smarter in terms of how do you look at risk and reward, how do you look at levels of investments. And so I think that's where many of them, while from an intent point of view, everybody agrees with collaboration, but it stops there other than a few, primarily because the commercial appreciation of what needs to be put in evolving a longer term partnership is where the challenge is. Yeah. I think that's something that I would want to add on.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Shiv Kumar.
But the food and feed industry will be ready to have some collaborative projects with the seed industry. Like Shiv Kumar, you said that you do it already, but I'm talking to others that is that something on which seed industry can take a step forward and get in touch with more and more food industry people and then try to
absolutely
together. Yeah.
Yes, I think we need to, there's a lot of work going on independently, but all working towards sort of the same end goal. And if we were to come together, then that's probably going to be more efficient and also more focused in terms of where that can be taken.
So I think PPP, instead of saying public-private partnership, we should develop some private-private partnerships here.
Yeah.
And then bring some better quality products to the market. So because the consumer is the king finally, I think by the end of this decade, this entire consumer-driven businesses will have to come up in the country. There is no other option for us. Actually.
No, but we'll have to build brands. I tell you that.
We'll have to build brands. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I think that is the job of people like you guys who are in the food industry.
Exactly.
But we have to have that bridge between the brands, the food industry, and the researchers of seed. I think that's what we will try to take as a takeaway from this. So thank you very much. I think we have finished our allotted time, but it was an excellent discussion. Sorry for the disruption about my temporary absence, and thanks Shivendra for stepping in there. But I hope it didn't disturb the flow of your thoughts and flow of your information and talk. So thank you once again, all four of you. We greatly appreciate, and we look forward to interacting with you more, maybe at one-to-one level, to take some of these discussions forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Arvind, will you give a vote of thanks?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much. The kind of panel discussion we have, and I think a lot of solutions are provided, and a lot of questions are also now there on the table. That where we can really join hand with the industry and the downstream industry, we call it, and the upstream research. Thank you very much for the panelists and our members who are of FSII. They are really encouraged by these kind of discussions, and I hope they are also get a lot of clue that in which direction their researches should go, so that they can give a better product for the industry and also better benefit to the farmers. The most important, I think, for the our members is that we have to work for a sustainable seed system, because we talk about food systems very clearly now in the UN approach. But I think this sustainable seed system is important for all of us. I think as a FSAI member, we should all see that we should develop a kind of system which ensure our smallholder farmer to get maximum benefit of our seed, because that is the market we look into. If we want to expand our seed market in future, we have to look into these areas where the smallholder farmers get the benefit. I know that there is a lot of challenges of agronomy and soils and other mechanical interventions, but still we can do better where our seed can provide a hardy solutions for those smallholder farmers. So I think we all come together as a group which really work towards that. And I really appreciate that you all came together in this meeting and appreciated the effort of the FSAI, our office, which arranged such a very good panel discussion and a very good panelist who had a lot of experience, and you get a lot of benefit out of it in this meeting. And thank you very much for joining us and participated in this discussion and provided opportunity us to interact with us. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming here and enjoy this meeting. Thank you, Ram, and thank you to the office bearers who really put a lot of efforts in this side and made this meeting very successful. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind.
Thank you, everyone.
We close the meeting.